Bandwidth for this podcast is brought to you by Ideate Software. Be sure to check out all of their great Revit applications designed to increase your productivity.
We are recording a BIMThoughts for our BIM listeners. Please enjoy the podcast. Well, we've made another BIMThoughts. I can't believe it either. I have Dana DeFilippi here with me, and the Carl Storms, and special guest, Ken Flannigan. Ken, how the heck are you?
I'm good. I think I'm good.
You think you're good?
Yeah, I think I'm good. It's not a popular time to say you're feeling great, but I'm feeling pretty great, actually. Things are good.
Good. So, define yourself.
Define yourself.
Yeah, define yourself.
Yeah, so, I was one of those guys that started working in the building design industry on the architecture side, and really just was a draftsman, but liked the technology, and was one of those guys that gets moved into a specialist role, and then you're kind of the unofficial CAD manager, and then you start asking questions and going to conferences, and then you become Carl Storms one day. Actually, no, I'm not going to become Carl Storms one day.
We aspire all to be a Carl Storms one day.
I know. But then just, actually I met Carl when we were both working for Reseller, and really that's where Carl and I got to know each other and got to work together. So I like to say I knew Carl before he was the BIM Sider. I think that's true, Carl. That's true, right?
It's 100% true.
All right, good. So that's how long we've known each other, and still we see each other passing at different conferences. So, but I did the reseller thing for, about 8 years, drove my wife and family nuts traveling, in irregular schedules, and took a job with KONE, the elevator and escalator company, about 4 years ago. So
it's been with ups and downs.
You took my joke, Bill. I'm just kidding. I got a whole list of them over here. We'll hit them all. I'm kidding.
I'm sorry. I didn't want to leave the door open.
I know. Well, that's my fault, really. Yeah, I take blame for that. But yeah, so now I get to do fun stuff in different parts of the world, and get to do most of it from home, which is not a lot has changed for me in the last 6 months as far as working from home. I'm used to doing that. So.
Yeah, me too. I've been working from home for a while. The only thing that's changed is I don't fly to Irvine every week.
That sounds nice.
Which I kind of miss it.
Oh, do
I miss going to Irvine once a week.
Some people, have to travel for work. Some people get to travel for work. You're in the get to travel. That's good.
Yeah, I in fact during the when I was traveling every week for a while, yes, I did get tired of it. But now it's like, man, I miss that. Getting out of the house and seeing all the sights, all the people.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like a break in the schedule, right? Like switch it up a bit.
And I used to fly out on Wednesdays, which was the perfect day to fly.
Yeah, nobody's on the flight, right?
Well, the flights weren't busy, but it broke up the week.
Totally.
So I worked 2 days, went to Irvine, worked, and then we work half days on Friday. So it was a day and a half left of the week. Life was good.
You got to count the travel day as work, right? You're looking at emails.
Well, the travel day is work, yeah.
So hey,
I flew in the morning, got up at 30 and took the first flight, and then flew back the same day at the last flight of the day. So I was just gone for the day.
Wow,
it was great.
It's a long day.
It was a long day. It was about got to the airport about 6 a.m. and got home about 9:30. So yeah, it was a long day.
So what can you tell us, Ken, about supply line model automation technology? That sounds fascinating. I don't know about you guys, but I want to know about that.
Yeah, so supply line, for what that means to me, at least at KONE, we have 4 global supply lines, and basically all the countries are almost their own business, right? That's the delivery operations for the equipment, but they're going to be manufactured in central locations, and those are the supply lines. So for us, we have America, Finland, Italy, China, and that's where engineering takes place. So when we say supply line, automation, what we're meaning is we automate the creation of models based on standard product data. Of course, we can only do that for standard product, but we automate the creation of those models so that we don't have to have an engineer spend time building one. Even though we do a lot of that too, that would be more like the custom type of processes. And we don't automate that as much as, supplement that with tools and things of the sort. But what I mean by that is we're automating equipment models to be used in the frontline delivery operations where the more traditional like BIM coordination happens.
So is that like a 5D level of operation? Is that kind of what you're suggesting? Like you're modeling it, you're designing it, and then what you actually design is then sent to the fabrication line.
I would love to tell you this nice, clean story about how everything is well connected. The reality is that's the goal. And what we feel, what we do with the models that we create is we communicate with customers. It's not necessarily the same engineering model that kind of where the hardcore stuff happens. We still have the traditional, like you'd find in a manufacturing facility or manufacturing kind of engineering office, those types of tools, which are not the types of tools that our architect customers and our contractor customers and everybody else wants, which is in kind of that whole BIM spectrum of file formats. So it ends up being the touch point for all those types of things that, it kind of has to get shrink wrapped a little bit because we're not going to give. And something that I think you would hear from a lot of building product manufacturers is we have more than you want. So, we're going to have to draw the line somewhere. BIM is basically the line we draw to what we'd like our customers to be able to use and see and interact with.
So that stems so many more questions, and I hope that I can remember them all. But so supply line, when you say supply line and having those distinct regions the supply line lives, is that based off of building code, or how do you succinctly define those supply lines? What's the differentiation between them?
Yeah, well, there's definitely different product lines, but when you're talking about like regulatory differences or elevators and escalators are super regulated, so there are codes that impact between different countries within the EU. So this is not it's not one thing. So the supply lines are located really to meet, I guess you could look at more U.S. standards, and that has a lot to do with how the business was built. But if you've ever been to Europe, and I'm assuming most of you guys have, that elevators look different in Europe. Right? You'd never see an American elevator in Europe. The size, the height, just the overall look of it is not what you see in office buildings there. They have different rules to play by, and for that, it makes perfect sense that those supply lines are separated. Plus, there is a physical factory. We actually have a factory here in Allen, Texas, where they do electrification of our one of our standard products. So it is putting the factory local to where the solution is, but the solutions are pretty gosh darn different when you look at these different parts of the world. Then you have China, and China serves a lot of different areas. In fact, they overlap even in some supply lines because they own, for instance, some of the escalator lines, not all of them, but it becomes product based at that point.
Yeah, and I know that in itself is fascinating for me. I feel like that in itself is a whole discussion versus building codes, and I mean, I know that whenever I get an elevator, or let's just say whenever a production architect or engineer comes to me and says, "Oh, I got an elevator from a manufacturer website," I say, "No,
yeah,
don't use that," right? Because like you were saying, it comes with so many parts and pieces. So it looks like you actually partake in the BIM forum. Is that something that you guys kind of look at KONE in terms of, like you were saying, what we use for the supply lines, what the AEC industry looks at, what's the differentiation there? Would you say that the content that you're sending out for the AEC industry is much more simplified, and that we don't need to see every nut, bolt, and screw in the elevators. Wherein, of course, when you're automating these things for actual production, you do want to see those things.
Yeah. So we try to address that, and I was involved with BIM Forum and the LOD spec committee to define this for vertical conveyance, so that for the very specific purpose, so that when we do our design tools, we don't feel like we need to go further than we should. Because generally, when you show something, it looks like it's fully cooked, right?
Absolutely.
It looks like it's a decision that's being made if you see it in 3D. So we took a different approach to, I think, some of our competitors in the kinds of details we want our design customers to use, which is less detail.
Mm-hmm.
Funny enough, on BIM Object we're on, and we're the number one elevator company on there. But we got to be the number one elevator company on there because we actually removed about 60% of our content, and we replaced it with LOD 100 flexible models that, based on the 3 or 4 inputs that you may know earliest, you're going to have this shape, and it doesn't get in the way of your documentation, or maybe it does. I've had a lot of feedback from that, but we get 2,000 model downloads a month. We get a tremendous amount of traffic from these super simplified LOD 100. We call them space reservation models. If you looked on our online toolbox, right, our online toolbox for architects, not for contractors, is probably the worst thing a contractor could do, is go to an architectural toolbox and configure a piece of equipment. But the options that you have there are a design model that shows the door and the car in kind of basic, very, very basic shaft shape, and an LOD 100, which is just a box with a top and bottom landing. So that we try to address, we help define it in BIM Forum, and then we built these tools and we put content online that tries to match up with that. There's more misuse on the design side of models that we produce and we distribute. We know that. What we really want people to do is get to the more detailed model.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, that's an LOD 350 model, which essentially has all the building interface modeled to LOD 400 and everything else modeled more illustratively. That's where we need it to get to do all the stuff we really want to do. Everything before then, it's a sales funnel, and that's good. It's a tool, but misuse is rampant.
And when you say misuse, you mean like maybe the architects are using that design model throughout the course of the entire project cycle, rather than switching that out for something that's a higher LOD.
Absolutely. It happens to us all the time. We move into a phase at some point where we're doing specialty contractor coordination, just like MEP does and fire protection does. And we're working with the general contractor and we're comparing things. And this has happened multiple times in the US, where what they end up doing, purely by accident, is they coordinate the models at the architect place of equipment, and not our separate file that we drop in and want them to coordinate from. And so we get this laundry list stuff back, when that's the most frustrating thing ever for them and us, right? They've coordinated the wrong thing. All the work that we've done kind of went unnoticed. So that's where we need them to get to. The design stuff and the lower detail is good, and we distribute a ton of it through our website and through BIM Object. But I watch more closely the amount of construction models that we produce as a marker of how well we're doing.
So the solution there would be, we in the AAC industry, we should be replacing our design early concept elevator concepts with a higher level LOD and maybe late DD, early CD, right? Go from that very kind of generic works in early design elevator to something that's much more detailed.
That is, I think, the most direct approach, right? The most direct thing you could say, that just use our model. I understand though that an architectural background, draftsman background, kind of a nerd draftsman background, honestly, I loved that. I loved AutoCAD. Strange, but I really did. But there's no manufacturer in the world that you can drop in content and it's going to document just like you want it to. So we're always going to have that hurdle when architects go to use our content. It's almost insurmountable. We have forums. We do a lot of engagement with customers, and we get a lot of variation in the answer. So I actually would prefer if the move went more towards just kind of admitting what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Because what ends up happening is and I did this too. It's a go by. It's the last project you did. You run up to a website you've heard of. You go grab something. It happens to our content too, and there's your base of design. But it's not your base of design because maybe you have a competitive bid or whatever else is going to happen. That you're the owner has a specific vendor they want to work with. Whatever happens, everything happens like that to us. Well, you've set your core of your building and your core of your structure on something that is incorrect. So, if architects instead looked at that core area and realized that they're never going to get to LOD 300 in that area unless they make a decision. Because for elevators, every manufacturer has different minimum shaft dimensions. Same performance spec, different minimum shaft dimensions. So something done in the era of, well, I'm going to keep it generic is not very generic. And it kind of dissuades competition in a certain sense. So I'd love for just that to be documented in LOD that you cannot take something to 300 unless you've made a decision. And that's a hard thing.
So I guess what you're saying there is that there has to have been a purchase decision made ahead of time to guarantee that we're using the KONE widget 5000 instead of planning for the KONE widget 2000, which is similar but completely different.
Or you use our content because you like it and you end up going with Schindler or Otis or Thyssen or somebody else, and all those assumptions that you thought you made you didn't. But
fair enough. So does that mean that you would like to see the vertical circulation space go into a place where there's more design assist?
Well, we're already seeing it. It's happening in a very similar way. I think you and I both saw it happen in the mechanical industry, where it really kind of started informally. It started through relationships, and then it grew, and there was some more formality. We do a lot of that today, and we're only going to do more of it. Essentially, though, it represents a portion of our business. There's also every 2-story and 3-story plus building in the world, which is a lot more than what's going to go through this serious design interrogation. So there's this kind of two ends of the spectrum when it comes to finding value and changing decision making processes. If I'm a Marriott, or if I'm somebody that has possible frame agreements with certain manufacturers, it shouldn't be a problem, right? That should be a very natural thing for the designer working for that owner to use that content. That's an important shift, right? And that's when you start seeing more combinations of companies come together, and whether it's kind of the formal things like Katerra and these vertical turnkey type solutions, or it's what I've seen more of, which is different, let's say structural systems and elevators, right? There are structural system innovations that still need to connect with elevators. So those informal relationships they've started that process in a very meaningful way. But generally, we do a lot of design assist today, and a lot more than we did 4 or 5 years ago.
So I guess the follow-up to that question is, and maybe it's a bit of a, as Bill would say, softball question, but are the clients that you're doing design assist with seeing value in it, meaning that the second and third time they're not spending as much time worrying about that because they know that you've got it?
To be fair, I probably couldn't talk about all design assist that we do in every form, but what I can say is that when we have, it's not necessarily a customer, it's a project manager on our side. When we have somebody that comes through the proper channels and gets models created and does the coordination thing, the thing that we all love and respect about all this whole process, they keep coming back. And so that's our kind of repeat business that it's working. Not sure if I completely answered your question there, Carl, but
I think you did, and the fact that I think that's the right answer. That whatever you're doing is working. People are coming back to go through those same channels over and above purchasing the equipment. It's the way that they got the equipment less change orders, less RFIs, because stuff was designed and put in place. Kind of the reason why we all got into this big thing called BIM in the first place was that, if we design it virtually first, life is better when we get into the bricks and mortar.
The very, very first like I joined KONE and I did not know anything about elevators besides, when you work in architecture, you always have that handful of painful projects because of the elevator, right? You don't get the clear overhead dimension right or whatever. You're putting a doghouse on the roof. It's not good. But I go to the very first like coordination meeting and we've trained the guys to run it. I'm just sitting in, just listening, and a well-respected contractor, he says, "I got a question." And it was a great question. It was a terrible question. I thought it was great that I was able to hear it. He says, can we maybe save some floor space and just make the hoistway smaller by welding the guide rails directly to the structural steel? And, when you look at the models, you think, well, gosh, you're just that close. Now you're missing the point of accuracy and things. And the answer is no. And it's really like, absolutely not. That's the most ridiculous thing ever. But that question from that contractor made me realize how far away the shared understanding of this type of equipment is. And it's big. It's huge in your building. We put on some HoloLens sets and we put, we looked at equipment within a hoistway. And even though it's behind the wall, you don't see it. It is absolutely massive. It's big, heavy equipment that uses a lot of power, could have 100,000 starts and stops a year. It's just interesting when you look at a model, you kind of get to that point quicker.
One of the oddball questions for you, Ken. About a year ago in Chicago in an elevator, no buttons on the inside of the elevator, just in the lobby.
Destination control. Yeah, it is weird. And we have these kind of mock-ups in our R&D facility here in Allen. And so we get to play with them and, try them out. But when you're actually faced with that, even when you know about it, the terms, the acronyms, there's something a little bit unnatural. Where I'm still the guy standing in the elevator. There's a Marriott downtown Dallas that my wife and I stayed at one time after I worked at KONE, and I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't. I stood there. But yeah, very odd. It's very odd until you go to a hotel that's also having a wedding and you realize that system saves you a 30-minute wait to get to your room. But it is. I understand your point.
And I'd never thought of the value to that system. That is it. But if you don't know the system and you get in the elevator and forget to push a button, you're screwed. But
you'll go. It's kind of like roulette, right? It's elevator roulette. You go wherever it takes you. But there's a lot of science behind those systems. I mean, the control systems and the simulation and testing. We have a laboratory in our test tower here in Allen that's what they're doing. They're simulating these systems, and it's completely silent to the user, right? As elevators should be until you run up against the system. No buttons. I should have told you next time, Carl, just think about the floor you want to go on. We have that technology, but
see, that would have been good. You'd hear stories of me standing there at the next event, just thinking really hard. Why am I not going? Yeah.
At Smith Group in DC, we have that technology, and I forget all the time. Like I honestly, because like you said, it's just not natural. I've been using elevators for my entire life, and it's just not the way that you use an elevator.
Yeah, it is. It's different.
I totally get it because DC has like 12 stories, but if you're in New York and they have like the bays, it's like 0 to 10 floors here. You can tell I'm a coder. I'm thinking in zeros. And then 11 to 20 is here. Those make total sense. I love those. But yeah, until you get into like a really, really packed building where there's a ton of people going to one place that you don't want to go, like you were saying, the wedding or whatever it might be, it just seems like it's not really worth it.
So what does the call cancel button really do in the elevator?
Yeah. It's funny. We have like the AIA presentation that I know a lot of our sales staff goes out and uses has like this elevator myth slide deck that is great. But I'm not the guy. I don't know. I know the people that know, okay. But I don't know.
So call cancel is just there for giggles, or it does nothing, but we don't know.
I'm really not sure.
It's probably for the fire department, right? Like they're really the only ones that probably can use that button.
I'm gonna look it up.
When I was growing up, my father worked for grocery stores and like a buyer at a grocery store chain, and people would call my mom and say, you know, I went to the grocery store and the strawberries were rotten, so you should do something about that.
Oh my God, are you
I
kidding me?
feel like that right now. I don't know about equipment or
All
running.
right. So since we've digressed, you have really had, I mean, I've went from production to consulting and like to back to kind of the production BIM kind of thing, but I really think that it's interesting that you went to the manufacturing side. I feel like everything but construction you have under your belt. Can you tell us a little bit about your evolution, just kind of maybe how it happened? Was it just, things fell in your lap and you're like, sure, I'll try that? Or was it, tell us a little about that.
Yeah, I would encourage everybody that works in this area. It's like waiting tables, but to work for a reseller, to work for Autodesk, work for somewhere you can do some consulting, mainly for the experience of parachuting in and out of these organizations that all have different goals, all have different cultures, all have different people, and just all the mechanisms of a large organization trying to change, because you're really only talking to them when they're trying to do something or somebody's trying to do something. But that really was it for me. I was the guy that knew Revit. I taught myself Revit architecture really well and wanted to move on from doing production work, and got recruited to come up to live in Dallas and work for reseller. And, the people there, the technical management there really allowed me to push myself and get into a lot of different areas that you wouldn't expect BIM to be in. I mean, if I think about the last 4 major consulting contracts I had at Imaginit, I can just say it, but at Imaginit was these were large owners. They were large logistics companies doing convention space setups and takedowns. They were kind of the definition of non-traditional BIM usage. And it was really, really fun. That's how I met KONE. And, I interfaced a lot because that organization has a manufacturing arm. I interfaced a lot with them. And, it's kind of a small world in a way. We kind of struggle with similar things in some ways. And KONE, they are a manufacturer. We're actually kind of a bigger specialty contractor. So most of what I do today is really working on implementing at the front line, which is just like your specialty contractor for any major trade on a project. And we have them in each country. So I think I have the best job in the world right now. We're like a building lifecycle partner, so I can do all like the service things and the lifecycle things with BIM, which is really interesting. We got the sales and design side, and then we have the construction side. It's kind of the 3 pillars, and it's interesting. There's a ton still to learn, but that's kind of the process. Really, the time consulting, and I don't know if you'd agree with me, Dana, but you grow and learn a tremendous amount, just an absolute tremendous amount.
I would say when I was with Microdesk, and I kind of worked all along the Eastern Shore, but just the amount of templates that I was able to open, right? It's like, whoa, you guys chose to do it this way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just even like being able to open up and dig in and see how they created things was just so interesting. And I think that's part of the reason why we like drafting so much. It's a puzzle, right? Yeah. It's like, how do you take this challenge and fit it all in? And I think that's definitely something that I definitely enjoyed of it. But I think absolutely consulting gives you such a wide breadth of knowledge about what the industry is doing as a whole. You kind of get pigeonholed into a mindset when you're working with especially a team, but even just a firm, in terms of how things are documented, how things are done in Revit, how things are just executed in general. And when you go out and you work in different places in different jurisdictions, and you see different building codes, different minds of thought, it definitely opens you up to seeing new things and get you a little bit out of your comfort zone, if you will. So I definitely agree.
Yeah. When I joined initially that life, I remember the people that had been there for 10 years or so, they were like, oh, you missed it. Oh, you missed it. Yeah, it was really good, but it's over now. So, and they were talking about like the early days of Revit and kind of doing a bunch of 101 type of training. And so, and that was true, right? I started that right before kind of the Great Recession. And, coming out of the Great Recession and into this really totally different hardware world and high-speed internet world, it's kind of an awesome time. I look back at those guys saying I missed it. I'm like, I think you guys missed it. But maybe it's always like that. Maybe that's why this kind of industry is so much fun.
So I'm going to age myself a little bit. I do this quite a bit on this show. I have never done production in AutoCAD, and I actually graduated in the Great Recession. So I was kind of forced to be a Revit girl. Like that's, in order to find a job, luckily in school, I was pretty good at Revit, and I learned Revit, and I came out and I, kind of embraced it. And that's just kind of how it was. So I think actually that period was a really wonderful period to embrace technology.
And you heard people at the time saying that, but not a lot of organizations like taking advantage of the lull. Here we are. So it's kind of awesome. I like that feeling.
I think the lull is when Revit really took hold as well.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Becoming more efficient in our tasks.
Well, we have to become more efficient in our tasks because we have less people to do less work, but same amount of work. As far as when you did do work, you had less people working on the job.
That's when people stopped using Revit like AutoCAD, or more people stopped using Revit like AutoCAD, which was always painful to endure.
Yeah. Just copying the building over to the right.
Yep. Yeah. Oh yeah, this is Revit 2.0, or sorry, AutoCAD 2.0. It's just the same thing. Same thing.
We're gonna draw in lines.
Yep.
2.5D.
2.5D. That's right.
Yeah. No, I think during that time people started using Revit the way Revit was supposed to be used because they had time to learn it. They needed to learn it to do it the right way. And usually the people that stayed in the company, it's bad to say, but people left the companies. People who stayed with the company were the ones that knew the technology, and they were the ones that wanted to get stuff done the right way. That's what happened.
I feel like absolutely. I feel like there was a precipice that kind of happened there, and now we're in another precipice with design and automation, and kind of getting into the API, creating a lot of these automation tasks, generative design, BIM for facilities management. I mean, I know that was talked about 15 years ago, but I feel like it's really starting to happen now.
Yes, things are getting different. They want more information out of the building, and so we're designing in Revit the way Revit was designed to be used now, and collaboration.
It's kind of interesting to see. I deal a lot with Europe and the different approaches different front lines have taken, and really just the market maturity there and market maturity here. And there was definitely a cowboyish way that the U.S. went about their BIM implementation to a wide degree, where if you look at a lot of European countries, they didn't just kind of go and then back their way into a standard. They said, whoa, hold on a second, let's create a standard. And nobody writes a standard like them. I mean, it's prolific, the kind of standards that they write, and duplicate ones, and one per country, and just a lot of different initiatives that you don't see as much here. And I was always kind of waiting for that switch to flip, where the maturity got so well, and this kind of rise of BIM managers and tech savvy people that they'd get into a much higher level of prescriptive BIM. And I really don't see that by and large in the U.S. today.
No, I don't think we will see that in the U.S.
Yeah, it's not really a top-down kind of mentality we have here, like in Europe. Well, and I feel like, I'm kind of torn, actually, because I obviously, coming out of school and learning Revit, I was definitely the type, like, let me just get in there and mess with it and figure out what's possible. And then we can figure out, like, what the rules are and how to maintain or break those rules. Right? Like it's kind of hard to say, this is what you have to do. Here's the standard. You don't know BIM at all. Follow this, right? It almost kind of creates this like fear. Whereas if you're just like, yeah, Revit, you want to learn Revit? Go ahead, get in there, learn it, do it, and massage it a little bit. And, I think it maybe is a two-way street we need to think about.
All right. Do we have any final thoughts?
Yeah, Ken, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with us today?
there's this middle ground that we're all going to have to get to, that I think hopefully starts with understanding how complex everybody else's work is. There's a lot of fun things. I like to point out things we like to point out things at KONE about the number of possible configurations of our equipment. It's billions, hundreds of billions. So is design, right? All those little decisions that are made. It's 100 billion, it's 100 trillion configurations. So at some point, we have to use this technology to get into a centralized place. You can read that as level 3 BIM, although that's open for a lot of interpretation. But there's a way that we have to look at this central place as where information is passed and where information is gained. And I don't see a lot of that right now. But I really hope that the tools enable that, and we get to that point, not just checking boxes, forwarding the email, "Oh, you have your model now, get out of my hair," but really engaging in shared understanding in a middle space. That's what I hope that we do with this. It's why I want to do these types of podcasts, and we want to get out there and talk to customers, is because we want to get them to expect this. We want to get them to do less work and turn over work when decisions are made, so that we have better products, the end product, that is.
And I think you kind of touched on the head there before, where you said you don't know what you don't know, right? And I think that's the case with everything. I mean, really, when it comes down to it. And I think that the fact that you guys are able to be there as a resource to be able to help and assist, design assist, those types of endeavors, utilize that resource, right? I mean, I think we can't all be experts of everything.
Absolutely.
Well, Ken, thank you so much. I feel like I've learned a lot today, if nothing else about elevators, but also about just Ken, the person.
I hope I didn't teach you anything about elevators. Really
well, BIM and elevators. Right?
All right, I got the people to talk to, but I don't think
the call button is still a mystery.
Exactly. I'll get back to you on that. What can I say?
Right. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Ken.